So in 2012, Bishop Talbert issued a call to biblical obedience in the United Methodist Church to all clergy, congregations, and members to live into a vision of God's fully inclusive, beloved community, no matter what. This was a significant moment in the life of our denomination, which furthered the movement of the church toward LGBTQ inclusion and justice. 2 years later, in 2014, Clifton United Methodist Church established the Bishop Talbert Award, given annually to recognize individuals, groups, or congregations that make significant contributions to social justice, especially but not exclusively related to the ministry with lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer persons. Bishop Talbert received the inaugural award in 2014. And again, I invite you to look at that plaque, which is now overflowing into a second plaque, thanks be to God. I'd like to it's my honor to invite Bishop Jung to come and to share some reflections on the leadership of Bishop Talbert.
Actually, I need a Benadryl because I have cat allergy. So quite a few cat lovers here, so that means I need it. I had a horse allergy and cat allergy, so my friend who has a really loving cats, they set aside room for us. There's no cat going in, huh? So that's the way. But of course, you're all nature lover, not human-centered. That's so great. And I am so grateful to be here. This morning I worshiped with you, not in person, but online. I was pleased to welcome our brother, Cedric, among us. And he's actually first bishop to welcome me to Ohio. So thank you. Thank you for being here, and you are a gift for us and for our church and our council life. Bishop Meredith Talbot is a giant. He's an amazing leader, and I put several categories about him because I've been nurtured by him a long time. I first time met in 1998 when I was joined the all-time General Commission on Christian Unity and Interreligious Concern. I had to spend the time with him because we were planning for the human sexuality dialogue for the whole church by our commission. And I was a co-chair with the Jen Love, who is another colleague. So we planned it, and immediately we say we're going to meet with the Bishop Meredith Talbot about it, in his own witness in his life. So we sat together it's a pretty long time and heard about his own witness and his own life journey, why we as a denomination need to move on to that full inclusion. Then I met him as a council of bishop member in 2004. I joined it. Of course, he was bishop in 1980 through 2000, so he retired, but he's been very active still in the council life. And so I got involved with the covenant group. Many times, quadrennium after quadrennium, the bishops are different group. But I was lucky to have an entire 4 quadrennium with the Bishop Meredith Talbot. So he and I spent it in the 4 quadrennium together in the covenant group, life sharing, pray together, and all. One point, actually, he was almost hit his own death and he couldn't be participating anything. So I spoke with his wife and check it out because I need to report back into the covenant group. And miracle can happen. Actually, about 3 years, 2.5 years, he wrestled it and he came back. And with a very crippled way, but it's a still form, joined it in the council life one more time. Then about a year plus, then he couldn't anymore. So I had a great benefit in personal way from Bishop Talbot. I invited him twice in Wisconsin annual conference. One time was Martin Luther King Jr. celebration in Milwaukee in the cold winter. It was a very heavy snow that time, but he was very willing to come up. So he speeched it, that shared his witness. You all know he was in prison with Martin Luther King Jr. about 3 nights, together. And he mentioned it that this is a person that I can, become a student. So he always called himself as a Martin Luther King's student, or the really mentored by King's legacy. I think that is a real sense of how much that Bishop Talbot, believed it and practiced it, the equity, for the equality and freedom for all. So he definitely no question about LGBTQI, the full inclusion. In that way, he fighted it. He witnessed it in the church. I was a preacher in Fort Worth, Texas General Conference, May 1st in 2008. I happened to be that time our siblings, the LGBTQ community, lay down in the whole docket of the conference center. Walking into the conference center was hard, and I was there as a preacher that morning. It was not an easy morning. That morning, Bishop Talbot hold my hand and say, preach. Your witness is important. And nudging me to stand up in the podium. I never forget that. And so he's a dear colleague in ministry. He believed in friendship. He believed in the human relationship is a key. He never, of course, he sometimes being challenged by a fellow colleague, even council bishop, but he always firm on his own belief, and then very nudging, without really pushing back, without angriness. He just hold the entire community in a very deep sense of accountability seeking. That was authenticity, isn't it? That was a powerful thing. I was scared in moment. And he is standing up without any trouble. You all know that your pastor mentioned about 2012, the biblical obedience, the call. I know thousand clergy family or clergy leaders signed it and working together. Then he witnessed in his life in such a great way. I think we are all indebted by his risk-taking, his authentic place of faith, and his deep fight as a Louisiana boy to freedom fighter through the whole life until 89 years old. So I am grateful that Clifton Church set aside that mark as a word to remembering him. I think that's a very significant contribution you do, and great witness. I'm thank all of you. Bishop Talbot was also ecumenist. He's been believed in the ecumenical life. So when he was a part of a National Council of Church, that steering committee member, and I know first thing that I remember, he came back to request to our General Council, Commission on Christian Unity, would you allow to have a $2 million loan, free loan to NCC USA? He's the one who appeared it to us. So we actually decided to give $2 million to National Council Church. As you know, that was that time almost the United Methodism participation into National Council Church is about 60% giving. And reduced it down and down, now probably about 35% still. Our United Methodism is very critical parts of the ecumenical movement in the U.S. The justice witness and social transformation as a Christ child, Christ community together. Mel Talbot was pioneer to do that, continually nudging that our church should processing it into. Well, discipleship time, we heard it about lots of different legacy, but he's also seeing our discipleship should be really bold witness within our social holiness witness. So even though the time to time the Church and Society and GBGM Global Ministry are a firm runner for the justice matter, but discipleship, when he was General Secretary, he led it into the key discipleship with the whole social holiness journey. So he impacted it many parts, many different places. And I need to celebrate his life and leadership and his witness. You all saw that when General Conference happened in the middle of the center. He's standing in the microphone and then witnessed it for inclusion for all. Yes, he believed it is obedience. Yes, he believed it non-violence. Yes, he believed that biblical justice is a supreme order than anything else. So he was firm believed that we all are equal. We all are respected. We are all are beautiful people in the God's creation. I hope that we can continue to journey that so that our church will be blessed. And then we can expand it, our mission, to those who are not yet with us, those who are not really that included it in our church, and those who are scared because the church's long time standing of exclusion. It is God's gift that now we are embarked at the inclusion, but hard work to do. Still long way that we are working toward a better future together. So, well, Bishop Mel Talbot, you're strong one. You're very giant. Your witness was so strong, and you're such authentic human beings. And we miss you, and we honor you through this day. Thanks be to God. Amen. Amen.
So I have the privilege of introducing the 2024 Bishop Talbert Award recipient, Cedric D. Bridgeforth, the Bishop of the Northwest Episcopal Area of the United Methodist Church. When Cedric was elected to the episcopacy in 2022, he became our first out gay, married, black bishop in the United Methodist Connection. Bishop Cedric is a prophetic leader celebrated for his unwavering, that might have been a little bit of a slip there. We go back a little ways. His unwavering faith to God's call of justice, inclusion, and transforming this church into the church that Jesus wants us to be. He leads with a deep awareness and commitment to intersectionality. Even before we had that word, before I had that word, Cedric was leading with an attentiveness toward intersectional justice. I was in a visioning meeting with Cedric when I was a local church pastor. He was serving as district superintendent, and we were doing visioning for California Pacific Annual Conference. And Cedric called our attention in the midst of our discernment to what he called layers of uncertain diversity that exist within us as persons and within beloved community, and the way in which persons experience both power, privilege, and marginalization in those layers of uncertain diversity. Before his election to the episcopacy, he held various leadership positions, including local church pastor, district superintendent, and the director of innovation and communication for the California Pacific Annual Conference. In each one of these positions, Bishop Bridgeforth focused on inclusion and affirmation of LGBTQ plus disciples, developing emerging leaders, revitalizing ministries, and fostering justice-centered evangelism and outreach. Cedric and I met when he was incoming district superintendent in 2008. I was the first introductory meeting that he was shadowing then district superintendent Grant Hagia. And I was a ball of nerves, like not the calm, cool, collected person that you see before you today. And we were touring this parsonage. I was 25 years old, recent seminary grad, engaged, not yet married, and I was touring this parsonage a mile and a half from the Pacific Ocean. Beautiful 4-bedroom house, 2,000 square feet. I was feeling so overwhelmed when Cedric did this to me. Come over. So I came over, eager to hear a word of wisdom and a word of grace. And he said, "Robert, you peaked at age 25. It's all downhill from here." I don't know what that says about Clifton United Methodist Church, by the way.
I didn't know.
In all of it, Cedric always reminded me and other young clergy to take serious things seriously, but never to take ourselves too seriously. Never to take ourselves too seriously. Over the years, his spiritual leadership and responsibility continued to grow and grow and grow, and the scope of that got larger and larger and larger, and he never lost sight, at least in my experience, of that deep commitment to the pastoral relational ministry. It's been part of his vocation and his call since he first said yes. When he was elected to the episcopacy, I was texting with some friends who were not so young clergy anymore. I was texting with my friends from CalPAC, and we were texting back and forth, celebrating this Holy Spirit moment when the church got it right. And there was a conclusion at the end of the text chain where one of my friends said, "If Cedric Bridgeforth is not called to be a bishop in this United Methodist Church, then no one is called to anything in this church." So we are grateful and we celebrate that the church is more whole and more holy because of the leadership of Bishop Cedric D. Bridgeforth, the 2024 Talbert Award recipient. Would you help me to welcome him? I have like an actual award. I almost forgot the actual award. This is the actual award that I almost forgot we had.
Thank you. Thank you. Came all this way, no plaque? Like what? It's a new day. It's a new thing. It's how they do it in Ohio. I'm going to put that there just so I can remember kind of what I want to say. But first, I do give honor to God, who's my creator, sustainer, and my all in all. Give honor to my spouse, Christopher, who's not my creator, but is a sustainer and my all in all. It makes a lot of this possible. Give thanks to you, Clifton United Methodist Church, for your witness, for the ways in which you have made Christ known in the world through your witness, through your work, through the years. Now, I got elected and I got consecrated and assigned as a bishop in the church. But I want you to know that I was the person who was kneeling and I was the one upon whose head hands were placed. but within my bones, I know that all of us were kneeling that day. All of those whom the church had told no, not you, not your kind, not now, and maybe not even ever, was kneeling that day. For those little ones who are yet to even discern what it means to be a person of faith, kneeling that day. Because my hope is that through being able to see someone like me occupy the spaces that I really count it a privilege to occupy, will help to bring about some beginning of healing for those who have been deeply harmed by and through the church. But also so that those little ones do not have to have that as part of their story. So thank you, Clifton United Methodist Church. Thank you, Pastor Robert, for your leadership. Thank you for continuing to grow from 25 forward. Thank you for that. Thank you, Clifton, for receiving him. And Bishop Jung, thank you for, through the years, each time we've bumped into each other somewhere, you've just smiled. And that has let me know it's okay. And then we eventually got around to have some conversation. And you told me it's okay. And now, serving with you on the council, a friend indeed. Thank you. So at Tampa, let me back up before that. I need to confess some things in the spirit of Bishop Talbert. Let me confess some things. So at the 2012 National Meeting for Black Methodists for Church Renewal, we met in, what's that place called with the lights and the slot machines and we met somewhere like that. And, toward the end of the meeting, I don't know if you've ever attended a conference or something in Las Vegas, but the room never quite fills up when you're meeting in Las Vegas. It just never happens. But we were toward the end of our national meeting for BMCR, and a lot of folks were leaving or gone already, and Bishop Talbert stood up. And Bishop Talbert was a towering figure everywhere he went. And there were a lot of giants in BMCR, let me tell you, a lot of them. But he stood beyond those giants. And in this particular meeting, he stood up and he gave a speech about something. I wasn't really sure what it was, but he really was excited about it, and he meant it because he went on about it for quite a while. And when he finished, he made a motion, which we all know that's not what you do, but he made a motion for BMCR to support this thing called Love Your Neighbor Coalition. And there was a little conversation back and forth, but BMCR voted to approve it. And I said, wow, what he just did was masterful. What I did not know is that just a few years later, I'd be the chair of BMCR and have to continue that ask of BMCR to stay involved in that work. And we did that and loved doing it. But that was 2012 BMCR national meeting. So that would have been in March or so. And General Conference happened in Tampa, and there was the tabernacle set up across the street from the Tampa Convention Center where we were holding. Is it all right if I tell this story? I mean, it's really confession for me. I haven't shared this, and I need to get it out, and I need to leave it here in Cincinnati. And so we're at General Conference in Tampa. The weather was lovely. And some of you in the room may know Larry High, wonderful layperson in the life of the United Methodist Church. If you don't know him, just Google him, you'll find him. If you ever need a restaurant recommendation anywhere in the world, just ask Larry High, he will tell you where to go. But anyway, we had gone off to lunch during General Conference, we decided we weren't doing the lunch thing there on site. We went off to lunch and had a pretty good lunch, and then we were walking back, and they had one of the roads closed off that we had walked over there on, so we had to come back around, and lo and behold, the way we came back forced us to walk past the tabernacle, which I had intentionally, let me own it, had intentionally avoided up until that day. And so we had to go past the tabernacle, and I turned to Larry and I said, let's go see what they're talking about. Because somebody was singing or something. Let's go see what they're talking about. And as we walked in, Bishop Talbert took to the microphone. And the first words out of his mouth on the microphone was, the time for talking is over. And I turned to Larry and I said, I think we ought to find a seat. And he waxed eloquently and intentionally about biblical obedience and why that's just where we were. And it was in that tent, in that parking lot in Tampa, that I said, even for me, my focus on inclusion has to change and become more serious. Because, see, I felt somewhat insulated and protected because I served in Southern California. I served in the Western jurisdiction. I served with a bishop who just loved to do whatever we needed to do to open the doors even wider. So I lived with a sense of protection and freedom that others didn't get to live. But it was the time for talking is over that opened my mind and opened my ministry in a different way. And I will be forever grateful for that. That's the first confession, that I skipped lunch and I avoided the tabernacle. There's 2 confessions. I'll give you a third. Just a few years after that tabernacle experience, I found myself in the midst of a very intense complaint process. Something I would never wish upon anybody. I mean, there's some people that I kind of don't like, and even those people, I would not wish it, well, I wouldn't wish that process upon anybody. So what I realized, that even in my little protected Western jurisdiction, Southern California bubble, that even in that setting, you are susceptible to somebody to lash out at you because of who you are. And if the wrong, I don't want to say the wrong person, but if the wrong, yeah, it has to be that, because it is a person. If the wrong person is sitting in the office that I now occupy, and yes, I'll say the wrong person is sitting in the office that I now occupy, don't read such charges in the way that a Mel Talbert or a Marianne Swinson would read those charges. Then we end up turning people's lives upside down. And that's probably all I should say about that in a public setting. So let me talk about why I think where we are now really matters. Because here we are on the other side of General Conference, where the restrictive language has been removed from the Book of Discipline, and there are 2 things about this. One, it's exciting, that's exciting. Yet there hasn't been a whole lot of celebration about it, and I think that's because of all the pain that's been caused along the way to get to it, and there's a sense of not wanting to rush past that pain and this season of lament before we get to the celebration. But here's the caution: if we don't raise up where we are soon, then I'm concerned about where we go next, or even how we get there. Right? I mean, that's just how I'm looking at it. And I think we have some great opportunities. I can't get past the sunglasses, I'm sorry. But he'll tell you later. But here's the thing. I think we have great opportunity to be better, to do better. I think we've always had those opportunities, but now let's go. One of my friends said to me after General Conference, he said, okay, y'all removed the language, so now the church is going to grow? Because y'all been saying, if we get rid of this language, then we can grow. So you got rid of the language, so now you're going to grow? I said, I don't know. I don't know. But I think we have great opportunity to get clear about who we are, which will be important in this moment. And not just who we are because some people left, not just who we are because the language changed, but get clear about who we are because of what God is speaking to the church in this season. I'll tell you a story or two, and then I'll sit down, I promise. First one goes back to 2016. And I was serving a church in Santa Ana, California, which is the county seat of Orange County, California, which is the only red county in Southern California. I know. It's doesn't that sound ideal? I mean, just doesn't that just sound like, woo? I mean, they really prayed that through, didn't they? But I was assigned there. I was assigned to this church, and about a third of the congregation supported the confessing movement. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's the opposite of the Reconciling Ministries Network. But I had a wonderful ministry there. Wonderful, fruitful ministry there. We grew by every indicator the conference was tracking at that time. So I go off to jurisdictional conference in Scottsdale in 2016. And so I got nominated. What's this thing we're doing? For bishop, nominated for the ballot. It's late in the day, so get nominated. Blah, 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 blah. I withdraw. No election for me. We elect Bishop Karen Oliveto. Wonderful thing that the church did there in Scottsdale. Consecration happened that Saturday. Sunday morning, I'm back in the pulpit in Santa Ana. That's how sure I wasn't winning. I didn't even have a guest preacher ready to go. So I was back in the pulpit for my 8 a.m. worship the next morning. And so I stood up in the service and I, shared an announcement. For those of you who are on social media and all this, you'll know this by now that, we, the Western jurisdiction elected Bishop Karen Oliveto, first openly, gay lesbian, in the church. A gasp across the congregation. And I said, wait a minute, what are y'all doing? Now, if I would have gotten elected, it would have been the same thing. Oh, but we know you. At the 10:30 service, I make the same announcement, almost verbatim. Standing ovation that Bishop Karen had been elected. I served the whole church. Those who were aghast and supported the confession movement, and those who were elated. And then we got to, the election and all that happened in November, and we had to live through that too. But we did it and continued to grow by every measure that the conference was measuring at that time. I lift that up here, and I want to lift that up for our whole church, because until or unless we who now feel that we have the church that we want, or that we have at least a baseline that works for us, until or unless we can see all of God's beloved as God's beloved, we will do nothing more than create another mess that divides us for the next 40 years. So the work now, friends, now that we've removed the language, what shall we say about who we are? And what shall we do that honors God and all of God's creation? That's the work. Because we legislated some stuff, but what we can't legislate are people's behaviors. We can't legislate what goes on in the hearts and minds of people. That gets changed through relationship and through experiences. So what relationships are we open to have that may not suit us right now, that may not look like the relationships we already have? Like basically, who have we decided to box out that we might need to box in? So I want to celebrate where we are. I don't want us to forget where we've been. We can't. That's hurtful, that's painful. We shall never forget that. But I want us to celebrate where we are. But I want to be a part of helping us figure out where we go from here, so that we do so in a very intentional and helpful way, to where we don't just decide, well, you know, all the people who don't like where we are, they're gone. That's not true. Amen? That's not true. Because we had a lot of congregations that at least had the conversation. And if you at least had the conversation, that means there was at least an opportunity. And that opportunity still rests for each and every one of us who have remained to get clear about who we are, not in a dogmatic way that boxes people out or excludes people, but to get clear about who we are and open ourselves up to what it is God is saying to us about who we must be and how we must be in the coming season. And maybe Bishop Talbert was right in 2012 in stating that the time for talking is over. And my recollection of what came after that really pointed us toward action. Action that demonstrated Christ's way of being in the world. And so yes, if the time for talking is over, then that means it's time for us to act as Christ would act in this season. And to do so with boldness, with intentionality, and with some enthusiasm. Church folk can be boring sometimes. Y'all gotta wake up and live. I mean, let folk know. Give us some of that you don't give us. You know, let them know that we're all right. We know how to have a good time. We just don't do it in here on Sunday morning. But, you know, we know how to have a good time. Meet us outside. We'll be ready. So God bless you, Clifton. Thank you so much for this honor. Thank you. All right, sit down real quick. I forgot this last thing I was supposed to tell you because all of you weren't here this morning, so you didn't get to hear the story about the stole. So I'm not just some pompous dude walking around in a stole just because if you know me, you know that's not me. But I'm wearing it because this is the day to wear it. At the last Reconciling Ministries Network convocation in Charlotte, that would have been last October?
Yep, that's right.
Wow, a year ago. Ooh. David Meredith, Jan Lawrence presented Bishop Talbert's stole to Bishop Karen Oliveto in honor of her being the first openly gay bishop elected in the United Methodist Church. And again, Karen and I are very clear with the openly part because we know we're not the first. Yeah. We're just the first who could be or would be willing to be open about it. Right? So let's be clear about that. And so anyway, so this was presented to Bishop Karen, and then there were instructions that came with the gift. And the instructions were that when Bishop Karen retired, that she would then pass it on to me as number 2. And then when I retire, then I would pass it on to number 3. Now that was a year ago. So much has happened since last October. Because what I heard in that, and as I reflect upon it, there's an assumption that number 3 would be down the road somewhere. Right? I don't know that was the thinking, but the reflection and history said to us, we got these too, you know, so. And I have a long time to serve, so they were planning on a long time, but And so that was the instruction. And so I received this in July at the Western Jurisdictional Conference when Bishop Oliveto, when we celebrated her retirement. Well, turns out that at that same jurisdictional conference, we celebrated Bishop Karen Oliveto's retirement, but we also celebrated Bishop Kristen Stone King's consecration. So, amen, amen. And Bishop Stone King, has the privilege now of being the first openly gay bishop elected without any shadow over her election. But I'm keeping the stole as long as I want to. Because the instructions were, and this is recorded, when I retired. Is that not what you said? That's what you said, when I retire. But I'm going to alter that a little bit because, Bishop Kristen's just a couple years older than I am, so she may retire first. I don't know. We'll see. But maybe we'll share it for this season. But this is the first day I've worn it since it was gifted to me in July, and I thought this would be the perfect occasion to wear it and to share that story and remind us that a year ago, an assumption about what this would mean is already outlived. Yeah. And so a year from now, what will be the story we tell, not just about this stole, but the story that we tell about the reconciling movement and our real quest for full inclusion in the United Methodist Church. So again, God, thank you. God bless you. You've already clapped and stood. No need to do that again. May heaven smile on you is our prayer. Be well.
So recognizing that we have two bishops among us, which I feel very holy tonight. Do you all feel holy? Like extra holy. But we also have Reverend David Meredith, who is the chair of the board for Reconciling Ministries Network. We wanted to have a panel discussion with our two bishops and David to talk about the future of the United Methodist Church. So I'm going to invite our bishops to come forward, and you all, if you don't mind sharing this wired mic, that way I could take the wireless, and David too, bishops and David. So, do you all have questions that you would like to ask about God's preferred future for this beloved United Methodist Church? Got one way in the back.
Will there be new liturgical rites made for same gender-loving couples' wedding ceremonies as part of our book of worship?
We were chatting.
One
Sorry.
more time,
Yeah.
Adam.
So
Start
will there
again.
be?
Please start again.
Okay. Well, will there be liturgies developed for same gender-loving couples who want to get married as part of our book of worship and hymnal?
I will say that Reconciling Ministries Network has those resources and will continue to make those resources available. That's not the same.
That's not the same.
As an institutional provision in the book of worship. I'll let one of our bishops respond to that.
Yeah, those resources are developed through our board of discipleship. And so the most direct way to advocate for that, because I don't know that that's a thing that's already out there, I think the assumption may be that, the resources will be assumed that they're for everybody. But we can quickly figure out who the jurisdictional reps to discipleship are. We can figure out who those folks are on discipleship. And those would be the people to have that direct kind of conversation with, because they can influence those types of decisions that get made for the board. It's a very institutional.
Other questions that are emerging?
If I could just say to Adam,
Sure.
to that question, the liturgy of the church historically has never been as inclusive as it really intends to be. And so asking the question of all of our liturgy right now about its inclusion of women or its inclusion of people of different cultural experience is an important question to always ask And now we can openly ask about LGBTQ inclusion in all of the liturgy of the church. And we should just keep asking and offering ourselves to help write it, work it, and put it in.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'd love to ask this question, so I will. Bishop Bridgeforth, I heard you talking about being the pastor of all of the people of a church that had great theological diversity. And we really do, I think, in the United Methodist Church, stand at a moment where some people, our more conservative siblings, are wondering, is there still a place for me in the United Methodist Church? And some of our people who have been historically excluded from the church are saying, is there yet a place for me, really, in the United Methodist Church? I'd love to hear the three of you express some wisdom about how we negotiate that moment. I think that's the moment we're in. How do we honor folks who are in very different places and not apologize and not backtrack and not try to keep everybody happy and yet have a big house?
I just to affirm that church is for all people, either theologically left and right, or progressive or conservative. A church should be all God's people. Ecclesia is no division, no kind of a boundary which was made it in the arbitrary way by human standard. So I feel that's a general my ecclesiology, but also I think administration, we as a bishop are truly honoring at our best too, that our church be, everyone can be, that part, engage and grow in their faith. Ohio, you've been through quite a bit of a struggle. We, I think over 300 churches left it, and East Ohio 230 churches left it. So both are trying to constituting our life together. What is our best for the future? Of course, I think we believe open mind, an open church. I think that's a great principle of Wesleyan Methodism, United Methodism. So we will continue pursue the theology or the landscape for the open church. I hope that is our future church. But stand in their own faith tradition, faith formation is very different here and there. And I hope that we can mutually covenanting continually so that we care, we really care each other, even though different stand or different place. I need to convince that many who are evangelical or some, their own orthodoxy, their witnesses, we need it. And hope they are opening through the Holy Spirit. They may stand more open to all humanity. Right now, immigration and many part of our social sector is a struggle because the divisive view that our church outplay. I hope our church is more holistic. Salvation for all, that's I dream for.
I would simply add, I think the real challenge for the church and for pastors, for congregations and pastors moving forward, is really a challenge of sight. And whether we can truly say, as pastors and congregations, to all of the variety of people within our congregations, I see you. I see you, and out of my own I learned this word from Michael Brubaker. Out of my own cultural humility, I see you, I want to be in relationship with you, and I'm willing to walk in that world and in that way to discover how we can be church together. And that feels for me quite different from being a pastor in a congregation that tries to seek to find the lowest common denominator to keep everybody from being in conflict with each other. I don't think absence of conflict is the goal. I think seeing one another and honoring one another and struggling with what we share and what we don't share is critical for us to move forward. That's not a method. There's no nice, easy, simple, plan. I think fresh expressions give us an insight into how to get there, but I don't think we have a model for it. It's about a way of living with one another.
Yeah, thank you. A couple stories. I live for a story, but a couple stories. The church I mentioned that I was serving in Orange County, when I went there, we needed to hire a new youth director, and the person that I was, stoked about was this young man who's Korean American, had served as a youth pastor at a couple of our Korean churches, and he'd applied prior to my arrival. And so they were already in this process when I got there. They were almost to the final interviews, and so they narrowed down to him and this other person. And so I got to choose, of those two people. So I met with him, and he was the one. He was the man. I was willing to give him my job. I mean, I was that impressed with him. And so we called him in to talk to him, and so he was a little, apprehensive, in the conversation. And so I asked if we could just have a one-on-one, because I just wanted to know what that was about. And so the team left the room, and so I said, let's cut the crap. Let's talk, because clearly there's something going on with you today that wasn't going on with you the last time we met. And he says, oh, so we're going there? I was like, we have to. And he said, okay, I probably don't have much to lose anyway. He says, I just don't agree with the fact that you're gay and you're a pastor, and I don't know that I can work with you. I said, okay, I appreciate the fact that you felt comfortable enough with me and comfortable enough with who you are to state that. And for that reason, I can work with you. And he said, what? I said, I don't need you to be a carbon copy of me. I don't need you to think the way that I do. I don't need you to believe what I believe. What I need you to do is to commit to the mission of this church and commit to the plan that we have to raise up these young people in our congregation and in our community. And I believe you can do that. And you can do that in a way that I never could and never will in this context. And he said, oh. Well, I came today prepared to say there's no way I would take this job. I said, okay. Then tell me that if that's really where you are. But if there's a little bit of you that can let go of your fear of what this might mean, and you could really say in your heart of hearts that you can commit to serve these young people, then give it a shot. I'll never ask you to be someone you're not. And I'll ask you not to ask me to be someone I'm not. He stayed there for almost 5 years and went off and started his own church, and the rest is history. Now, it wasn't a United Methodist church that he started, but the church is the church is the church. So that's one. Not asking people to be someone other than who they are. But in the midst of that, not closing off the opportunity for people to grow and to change. Right? See, I don't want you to assume that I'm done growing, that I know everything that I need to know. I better not assume that about myself. Because the only entity that I know that we can make that assumption about is God. But even, if you're a good process theologian, you think God is still evolving, right? But that's a whole Claremont thing. You're not ready for that. I'll leave you alone. I'll leave you to your ways, right? I'll leave you to your ways. But, assuming that I have it all figured out and where I am is where I will always be, that's a God complex that I never want to have. I don't want it for myself, and I don't want to institutionalize that either. And I mean institutionalize in all the ways that we use institutionalize, right? I don't want us to institutionalize that. So there's that. The second thing I would say is that I mentioned this in one of my sermons today. I don't remember which one. But Progressive United Methodist, which is an uppity term, by the way, it is as bougie as you can get. Progressive United Methodist. So I'm not here to change the language. I'm here to answer a question. But Progressive United Methodists do a really good job talking about inclusion. You've perfected the language. You've even created a full lexicon for us to use over the last 40 years. What we have not done well is practice it. We have not practiced full inclusion. And what I mean by that is we've made room and made space for those who believe the world ought to look the way we believe the world ought to look. And anybody who's not willing to see the world that way does not matter. That's not full inclusion. That's the same exclusive practice and behavior that we've spent the last 50 years trying to undo. So we have to get some new language in our lexicon about what we mean by inclusion in this time. In this time. Because if we're going to live in this here world, in these bodies, with these identities, and the variety of theologies that exist, even in our own households, then we're going to be a little bit open than we've been for somebody to have a different idea or a different perspective and understand that it is not our job to change people's minds. Our job is to build community and to be in relationship with one another. And if we can commit to building community and being in relationship, it's in the being together that we grow together, that we understand, that we're able to hear one another, and where we're able to call out behaviors that do not support the community's growth. Now, don't walk out of here saying, he said I need to stay in an abusive relationship, or he said I need to walk into a community where they're just going to treat me like trash. That's not what I'm saying. Not what I'm saying. But is the commitment to community, and is there an openness to being in relationship? I mean, for me, that's a starting place.
So, Bishop Bridgeforth, I'm going to ask you this knowing I'm not as good and holy as you are. I'm not, and that's why I'm not a bishop. So keep that in mind as I ask this question. But in trying to understand all that you're saying, and I love when you said earlier that we need to be clear about who we are. So with that in mind, when you were hiring this youth director, did you not fear about harm, the potential for harm, especially with youth? And so what would you say to that, or how would you handle that? Did you not have that fear and that consideration?
Well, maybe, but there are a couple things. One, as I stated, I was, just where I was serving was a relatively safe place to serve and for me to be me. Number two is there was a power dynamic at play there. I was the one with the power. I mean, so I could proclaim all kinds of things. Let's be honest. I could proclaim all kinds of things. But given our polity, he really had power over me. And always would, right? Always would hold that power. So So that's where the mutual agreement about what this relationship is going to be is important, right? So me being clear about who I am, you being clear about who you are, and really a commitment to grow together without the underlying agenda to get you to my side or the underlying agenda for you to get me to your side. But can we just get together? Right? Let's just swap recipes. Like we don't need to talk theology today, but let's just talk. Tell me about your childhood home. What did it look like? What were those smells that you like to wake up to? Right? Or tell me about the school you went to, middle school. What was, no, that's too traumatic for all of us. So don't go there. Don't go there. Yeah.
I'm not sure you heard, she was asking about youth. About how he would, you're talking about you. I think you only heard.
I heard you. I'm sorry.
And I think her question was about, did you have any concerns around the youth of the church under his tutelage?
Oh, got it.
Any concern about protecting them if they were elsewhere?
Got it. Okay, got it. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the question, because I heard a whole different thing. All right, so that answer was the answer to the next question that's coming. So there that is. Well, the first part of it still fits, right? I mean, there was still a supervisory relationship that happened there. But no, I believed in what we had seen in him and of him, was of great integrity. He had a different basic theological grounding, but he wasn't teaching something that was wild and crazy. This was a 23-year-old, so he hadn't gone way off the rails or anything. So it was, and he was a PK. So, and it was in one of the seminaries that we recognized, and so I had comfort with that, and we agreed to weekly conversations about, his growth and development in the place at his request. He requested a weekly just for us to talk. That wasn't a supervisory conversation, but for us to be in relationship. That was what he felt he needed in order to be in that space. And we had other adults who participated in our youth program, so it wasn't just his show. He coordinated it, but we had parents who were involved and other staff who were involved. So, and all of them had a variety of theological perspectives, because in our church, we had several language ministries. We had Tongan, we had Tagalog, Ilocano, Spanish, Cambodian, and then a hodgepodge English language ministry, and I led all of that, all of the pastors for all of that. And so we had parents from all of those communities working together. And the truth of the matter is 80% of the congregation were more in line with where he stood, basically theologically, than where I stood. So I needed him in order to balance out the conversation and the picture with all of those communities. Yeah.
Do you have another question? Oh, Michael, yeah.
Sorry, I'm hanging out behind you. So thank you all again for being willing to have this conversation. My question really has to do with how you advocate among your peers, and I just want to share the story and my experience of our recent events, and that being once we've had this wonderful but also recognition of pain and not quite as joyful as I'd hoped experience of our discipline changing and all the things around us, to see a message from our bishop, which our bishop's retired, and this is not about him, because I understand that many bishops actually carried this message, which was, yes, we're moving forward as a church, and I know many of you are afraid about having gay clergy. And guess what? You don't have to have one, because you can always refuse to have a gay clergy. And to me, that was, that hurt in a way that I didn't expect. And I was incredibly disappointed not to have the moral certitude of God's love and God's embrace. And I know all of us, including you, are all just people. And you're managing probably the hardest jobs in the Methodist Church, to be the bishop and holding these spaces when I can sit in a pew here in my wonderful family of people here and just feel God's love every Sunday. So I know you're in the hardest of spaces. So this isn't a finger pointing. It's much more of a space to say, how are you helping to advocate among your peers to be centered in God's love, message of love and goodness, and helping to not be in the worry of fear, to help people to look beyond their fear, to see that bigger message of what God really has for us in the present and in our future. So that's my question to you, and how you have a voice that's different than ours here, and how you're able to do that with your peers.
I have a reconciling answer, but do one of you want to do it? Let me give you a reconciling method, ministries network answer, Michael, and then let the bishops speak to the institutional life of the church. But Reconciling Ministries Network recognizes that the movement that we're in the middle of is a movement that's going to need nurture, it's going to need coaching, it's going to need some exorcism of some old fears and some old systems that are particularly tuned to work a particular way, and those are unjust and they're unhealthy ways that we have to find a way to expunge. So what Reconciling Ministries Network has just done is adopted sort of a new strategic plan to work on several key things, but one component is to boldly influence the United Methodist Church so that it can become the place of intersectional justice for LGBTQ folks around the world. And what that looks like in practice is making, already currently, RMNs providing resources to coach boards of ordained ministry about how to receive candidates, process candidates, work through a system now that is free of those old policies of exclusion. And we've been contacted by bishops and cabinets to help them. The question to us is, help us figure out how to prepare churches to receive gay pastors. We think it's still the wrong question. It's still the wrong question, but it comes from the right place about how does the church become its fullest expression of equitable treatment of congregations and pastors in the appointment process and season. So that's what RMN is committed to do and working to do. What do you guys want to say about the United Methodist Church?
I am very happy that Root and Rising, the network, is here. So I hope that I can continue dialoguing with you and learn how we can do work better and right path. Yeah. Well, I was recommended my ordination from University Church in Madison, Wisconsin. There was reconciling congregation very early on. So whenever I engage in my ministry, I always remember that colleague, that family in University Church recommended me to the ordination. There was some way my own baptism, the remembering that baptism, that I've been really grace upon me, that I've been new as a Christ child and beloved one. So that between that, where I've been affirmed in my call in United Methodism, then when I was baptized, those kind of call story is in me, and I will continue to operate. Even institutional church management comes with that, my own genuine involvement and awareness about the God's people. When I was a bishop in Chicago, my second year, I named it one district superintendent who is a super gifted, an excellent, wonderful one. So, in my prayer discernment, I name him as a superintendent. He's a openly gay person. Of course, I received 100 emails and protest letters, and I thought, wow. But when I protected Elvira Eliano, who is taking sanctuary movement in one of the street church in downtown Chicago, entire year I have over 1,000 email, hate mail and all. So protecting that widow with the son who is undocumented, deportation order is in, but we as a church need to protect her. I declare that yes, Chicago Tribune say yes, Chicago Sun-Times say no. And there is always those challenges. At that time I felt the same thing, that God calls us to continue to be whole as a community, as a together. Well, I went to Wisconsin Conference 2012. A year and a half ago, Amy DeLong's trial happened. So the clergy community was really mess, low morale, and she was not able to practice her own ministry. So as a bishop of the church, I declared myself to the cabinet. I am post-trial bishop. My role is healing this woundedness as a whole. So I entertained it and appointed her to the local church ministry. So she came to that annual conference with the crystal ball, the crystal doll, the pig with the wing. And she say, Bishop, you made it me as a pig with a wing.
Flying pig.
Flying pig.
Flying pig.
And I still have that in my suitcase. So it's not an easy process for how we lead a church, yes. When Karen Oliveto elected it, I was close to her in many ways. When there's a parchment that we sign it, her parchment was half. Bishop was not able to sign it. I requested to the council, we may bring it back and we're going to sign again. So we did it together. Our church is not really in all the ground that we are able to say we are in the right place. We are still moving into the constant wrestling, as you say, trouble. Even staying with the trouble is faith language. We need to continue perfecting it together. So the church is not a perfect one, brothers and sisters. The cabinet, being a bishop of the church, I've been doing this 20 years now. I'm here in Ohio land, holding in my daily prayer. I hope that we can gather as a community, bring the hope for the future, and bring continued life-giving, continually be a church in this time and age. So I need to say, advocate for this whole process. It's living with that firm belief of your own baptism and your own call, where you've been and how you're going to live it out daily. I think that's my simple answer, and I hope that someday that all the church will celebrate the gifted in ministry as all people, no matter who they are. You know, cross-racial appointment right now and the migration matter in right now, this is another toughest place, and our church is not embracing yet. Even though I am a bishop as an immigrant person, yes, there are lots of ways that we need to grow together. So I hope justice is God's call and God's mandate, and we're gonna really hold it that as a sacred call together as a church. We will pursue. That's my response to you. Thank you.
Yeah, first off, the Council of Bishops is not a unified voice on anything. And that's not a indictment, that's just reality. I mean, a thing's a thing. I mean, so you have a collection of individuals who lead a variety of areas around the world, who come together twice a year for 4 or 5 days with a very structured and scripted agenda to do some very specific things. It's not a leadership team per se. It's not a group that comes together and says, these are the 3 or 4 things that we're going to do to lead the church. Instead, it's these are 3 or 4 things that we're going to do within the council to hold the council together and provide insight and maybe some instruction or direction that may help the church go in a particular direction. That's been my 18-month experience. Excuse my newness to it all, but that's how I would assess it. And again, that's not an indictment, it's just how I understand the experience. Trying to root it in your question about how do we help our colleagues. I think the most direct space or the easiest space to support and engage our colleagues is within our colleges, not within the council. Because the Council of Bishops is made up all the active and retired bishops from around the world. The College of Bishops is a smaller body. Again, it's all the active bishops and the retireds, but it's a much smaller body, and it's a group of folks who are together on a more regular basis and can do more of that connection. Some of the things that we're talking about in our jurisdiction is really around preparing all of our congregations to have all of our congregations prepared to receive cross-racial, cross-cultural appointments. Because to assign a queer person to a congregation, that is a cross-cultural appointment. To assign a clergywoman to a congregation where there has yet to be one is a cross-cultural appointment.
That's right.
To assign a 25-year-old into a congregation, that has, a quarter of the congregation are octogenarians, that's a cross-cultural appointment. So we're doing that type of work, right? Starting down the road of doing that type of work. Because I know in my own area, in that wonderful part of the country that I serve, there are about 80% of the churches that I could not be assigned to. And it's not just because of the congregation itself, but a lot of it has to do with the context, about the community around it. We would not be safe in Idaho. We would not be safe in Eastern Washington. We would not be safe. You with me? I mean, so that's the reality. That's what we're called to lead in. So that's why I say, even on a congregational basis, to take seriously the reality that you're not all of one mind and you're not all alike, and trying to get to that is not helpful. But trying to get to a space where we can all be present and we can all just be who we are together. Now that's a higher bar, and I'll leave that alone. I think I've kind of overdone that. But the work of preparing our congregations to receive whomever can be sent, to me, is at the core of where we are. And not just limiting cross-racial, cross-cultural training to those places who are going to receive a cross-cultural or cross-racial appointment within the next 60 days. That's a horrible way to lead. It's a setup for the congregation, it's a setup for the clergy person, it's even a setup for the community that we're sending them into, right? So to me, the higher call is for everybody to get ready and for everybody to make space to receive whomever God might send. That's harder, and that means we have to be honest about our racism, we have to be honest about our sexism, we have to be honest about our homophobia, we have to be honest about our classism. As United Methodists, we are really classist, so we have to be honest about all of those things in order to do this type of work. But I feel that's where we're called. And so just one example within our jurisdictional college where we're trying to focus on that.
The thing I hear Michael asking that I still think...
Did I miss it again?
No, you didn't miss it. You didn't miss it. No, but I just think the part of the troubling thing in what Michael was referring to was that people were given permission to refuse. And what you described as a vision, that's a robust vision that I share. I just don't think we want to give any folks in the United Methodist Church permission to be racist, permission to be sexist, permission to be heterosexist. And I hear that in Michael's question.
Yeah, thanks for calling that back, because that was the thing I picked up in the original. But Bishop got me stirred up on another piece over there. Yeah, one of my in my earlier confession, I named, that I expected there to be greater celebration on the removal of the language, and there was this kind of sadness, about it all. And right after the vote, I was walking with one of my colleagues, and he was like, "Well, how do you feel about this?" I said, "Well, I feel some kind of way. Like, one, I'm a little bothered that this all happened, on a consent calendar, and like I'm a little concerned this was happening. I mean, because anyway, so I was concerned about the consent calendar piece, but I was also concerned that what we did, and here's the hard truth for me, still today. What we did was we moved from saying you must discriminate to saying you can.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, that was the move.
That's the truth.
It didn't say don't.
No.
It just went from you have to you can.
That's right.
Right, and that's what I was feeling that day, right? That's what I was feeling that afternoon, and walking, and sharing with my colleague. And so, that's why, when people are sort of giving the "we've arrived" language, there's this caution of no, we have not. Like, because there's a behavioral component to this, and yes, even more legislative work that has to happen. But we have to be careful with the legislative piece, because you try to legislate it again, you're going to open it back up, and you could end up in a worse place than you were before. So you just have to be aware of the legislative piece, and I don't think it all needs to be done legislatively. I think there's a relational and a practical piece that has to be in place, because as the language will stand, as it will be printed for us in January, it does still say that you can. You can make that choice, right? So, I mean, that's kind of sort of not as sour as it was before, and it does create an openness that wasn't there before, but there's not the complete openness that we desire, So there is space in there for that.
Last question.
I don't really have a question per se, but I have a request, I guess. When I look at the West Ohio website, I feel like there's an omission, and the omission is LGBTQ. And that there's wonderful sections on racism and beautiful classes and events to help people with that, but I don't see anything. There's like nothing on LGBTQ or homophobia, sort of goes along with this thing. And so my request since I have Bishop Jung here personally, I will take advantage of that, is to find a way to make us more visible.
Thank you. I will, work with our leaders. Maybe we can continue serving that way. Actually, I read it, Rooted in Rising, through our web, actually. So, yes, I think you're some gathering or some other event that reported it in the webpage. That's why I know the Rooted It and Rising, the Reconciling Ministry. Yes, so that was a good thing, and that's wonderful. It's so many ways that we are living with much trauma. It's a deep sense of woundedness. That's a LGBTQ community. I need to really say that, so sorry that our church has been harmed in many years, many times. Not just language, just we lift it up, but there's a loss of trauma done. So I, as a bishop of the church, I need to say, still so sorry about what had happened. Yeah. But also trauma-informed way we can work together toward that, because many generation young in the future, how we church saturate this ministry together, it really depends on, I know our Bishop Cedric mentioned it, that how we're going to live out, how we're going to act on, how we're going to practice. Probably that's still a great arena. I've been nurtured by really like MFSA or, Reconciling Ministry, Urban Ministry, and many part of it. And I believe still this is the journey that I've been taught with the bold witness by all of you. So you're the gifts, and not only webpage, but we're gonna work on more so that we care, we grow together. And so tonight I need to say to thank you, all of you. I think this is a great witness, and I know that counsel, Bishop life, and many things that we kind of sometimes how we need to really witness and grow together fully. I think that's, but in many arenas we are living nowadays with such a trauma. So how are we going to sort of care to each other? How are we going to really caring, relationship building that Bishop talked about it? I think that's very crucial for our future. And when I walk into the church, I want to see the bright smile and bright welcoming and life celebration for all. So the church is the place that people are yearning to come. But the church has been beaten down now, many places. So soul care and constantly encouraging mutual mentoring, so that hopefully a generation after all, the surrounding community may come with a very safe and cared and touched it by our church. So let me work on with you more, okay? Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Did you? We've not had a chance to meet your spouse, who I know is here. Would you like to introduce your beloved?
My beloved, yes. Would you stand up? She's an ordained elder in Wisconsin. So when they farewelled about our living, they were very happy that she's not going to leave Wisconsin because she's a member of Wisconsin Conference. But of course, she journeyed with me in Ohio land, and she enjoyed every bit of it. I know it was tiring, let's say, travel back and forth in East and West, and we've been dancing quite a bit. But we are very blessed, and she's a director of the Upper Room Ministry in Nashville for the International Emerging Ministry arena. So this is her 14, 15 years as a director, working with the multiple land in Asia and many partners she's working with it. So she's my better half. Yes, she's a great one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We wanted to make room for this really important conversation. Would you please show your appreciation for Bishop Jung, Bishop Bridgeforth, and David? Pastor Deb Stevens is going to offer a quick word from the Reconciling Ministries Board. Quick word.
Don't sit down. She's got something for you.
Bishop Jung, Bishop Bridgeforth, I have a small token of our appreciation for your ministry from Reconciling Ministries Network. Where did Bishop Jung go? Oh, okay. When he comes back.
Oh, all right.
Another room.
With my muffin name. Where's my name?
So my name is Deb Stevens. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm here because there may be 2 or 3 of you in the room who have not recently heard me talk about Reconciling Ministries Network. I am privileged to be a member of the board of RMN. I want to say a word about why the work of Reconciling Ministries Network has become such a part of my life. For me, this is it's a theological commitment. It's because my most formative memory of church from very early in my life is that my father, I was a very small child, I don't remember this, I've just heard the story. When I was an infant, my father was the assistant scoutmaster of the Boy Scout troop at the United Methodist Church, where my parents were married and I was baptized. And Boy Scout Sunday came around, and the Boy Scouts ushered, as they do on Scout Sunday in churches that still have carried on that tradition. There was, in rural central Indiana, in this little town I grew up in, an African-American child, young man, who was a member of the Boy Scout troop, who ushered in church on Boy Scout Sunday. That week, the administrative board had an emergency meeting and they fired my father, an Eagle Scout who had grown up in that troop, who'd been a camp counselor at Boy Scout camp, and who was the assistant scoutmaster at the age of he was probably 22 or 23. They fired him from being a scoutmaster because he permitted this Boy Scout, who was an African-American young man, to usher in the church that I was baptized into. My father gave up on church after that. For some reason, I didn't give up on church, and church didn't give up on me. But when I became a part of Reconciling Ministries Network, when I was introduced to the work of Reconciling Ministries Network, it was first of all because of my care and concern for LGBTQ people that I knew and loved, who were a part of the church. And I didn't even know for the longest time that we were discriminating against LGBTQ people. I wasn't even quite awake to all of that until sometime in the 90s. But that tapped into that place in me that knows that church is better than that, and that God is bigger than that. And so that's why I've been so committed to this work, And I have never told that story publicly before. I've written about it, I've never told it. Reconciling Ministries Network, as David said, has a new strategic plan coming out because we've been asking the question, what's next for the United Methodist Church? What is our role? How do we bring this inclusive, beautiful, beloved community that has clung together and created a glorious image of church? How do we bring that beyond this moment where it's no longer a protest, but it is poised to be a celebration of who God is calling us to be? How do we bring that to the whole church? So David talked about our commitment to the denomination, but we also have in our strategic plan a commitment to resource local congregations, to be congregations, places where everybody is seen for who they are, and where we can equip our congregations so that no child ever has to feel like they have to give up on the church because the church wasn't there for them. So we need you to join us in this work. We need you to join us for this. You know, some people have been like, well, we got the language out of the discipline, our work here is done. You've heard the bishops say our work here is not done. Reconciling Ministries has a vision for this. We have a plan for this. We need resources. We are completely dependent on the donations that people give us. We know that you're being asked to give in a million different ways right now. But some of you have seen this before. You got it at annual conference. You might have gotten it if you were at general conference. We have a view book that describes where we've been, where we're going. We're asking folks to commit to make a financial gift to Reconciling Ministries Network for the next 5 years. To choose an amount that you will give and say, I will give this amount. Maybe you'll give it monthly, maybe you'll give it annually. We give monthly from our house. It just comes off our credit card every month, and to keep up that commitment for 5 years. But to tell us about your intention to do that so we can count on you, so we can plan on it, so we can do our next vacation Bible school curriculum. Is anybody here a part of a congregation that used Just Like Me this summer? Yay, our first VBS curriculum. We have another one that we're hoping to begin soon that we think will be specifically around how to include neurodiverse children in the life of that will be attentive to neurodiverse children. So I'm just here to say, we all know somewhere in our hearts that God's intention is for every person to be seen, to be beloved, to be cherished, and to be able to be all of who they are as a part of our beloved communities of faith. Help us share what is real here at Clifton and real at some of the other congregations that are represented here at Bethel and other places. I see some Maple Grove people. I don't know who all's here, but you all know what it feels like when we do what we do. Help make that possible in United Methodist congregations across the connection. Thank you. And Bishop Jung, we have a Reconciling Ministries Network mug for you.
Let's rise as we sing together.